All right, today what we're going to talk about are forms of quadratic functions. So basically we're taking everything we've done before and putting them together and kind of switching from one form to another. So there's some important things to know and about each of the forms and why they are beneficial. So first you have standard form. That is your ax squared plus bx plus c. And this form is good or beneficial because it helps you to see the y-intercept pretty quickly. So remember, it's 0 and whatever your c value is. So that's the benefit there. For vertex form, this is where you have a times x minus h squared plus k. So this form is beneficial or good to use when you need to figure out what the vertex is, or if you know what the vertex is, it's good to put it into this form. And remember, your vertex is hk. And then you also have factored form. So this is what you've done before, where you factor it out, and then typically we've equaled it to 0 to solve for it. And this one is good because it shows you the x-intercepts. So remember, whatever your intercepts are, you solve for x and the other number is 0. So factored form is really good because it helps you figure out where your x-intercepts are. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through one form to another, and we're going to do all three forms, and we're going to start with this equation. So when we start with this equation, if you look at it, it's in vertex form. So vertex form is the answer, and then we know from here the vertex is 3 because remember, it's always going to be, if it's a minus here, that's really a positive 3 there for your x, and then your y or your k. So this is your h and your k. So that's going to be right there with -1. Now that we know what our vertex is and we know what vertex form is, now we're going to take that and we're going to convert it to standard form. So what you're going to do here is notice that this is squared. So what that means is you write it twice. And then once you write it twice, then you can go ahead and distribute. And that's what you get when you distribute. And then just don't forget to bring this -1 down. And then you're going to combine like terms, and you'll get y squared minus 6x plus 8. And this is in standard form. And what's great about standard form is we can just look at standard form and say, oh, the y-intercept is 0, 8. So all you have to do is look at your c value, which is 8. Now we're going to take this form, and once we have our standard form, now we're going to put it into factored form. So after we've done all of that from vertex to standard, now we're going to do factored form. So we're taking our equation here, and you're going to factor whichever way you want to factor. So you can do the x game, you can do guess and check, you can do whichever way you like. I just did the example here for you. So when you broke this up, you got x minus 4 and x minus 2. And then set each equal to 0. And once you set each equal to 0, you know x equals 4 and x equals 2. So then remember, factored form, you're able to find your x-intercepts. So this goes here, you know y is 0. And then this goes here, and you know y is 0. So now that we have all of these pieces of information, now we can go and we can graph it. So we've got the vertex, which is plotted right here. We've got the y-intercept, which I had to add. You'll have to extend your line up here, but I put that at about 0, 8, and then you have your x-intercepts. And now that you have these major points of your parabola, you can go ahead and graph it. All right, so now let's look here. And in this case, we're starting with standard form. So again, we know what the y-intercept is right away. And we're just going to pick, it doesn't matter which form you technically go into next, so just go factored form because that's what I put for you. But for factored form, we're going to take our standard form and you're going to set it equal to 0, and you're going to factor it however you like to factor. And then now I've got x minus 5 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, so your x-intercepts are going to be 5 and -1. All right, so I've got y-intercept, I've got x-intercept. The last thing I need is the vertex. Now this is where it's different, so just be careful and pay attention, and we'll talk a little bit more about this if you get stuck, because there are different ways to do this. All right, so for vertex form, you're going to complete the square, and I'm going to show you a slightly different way than what we practiced last unit, but you're still the same process. So when you're completing the square, remember you've got b over 2, and then that's going to give you the part in the parentheses, and then you square it, and that's going to give you your plus c value in there. All right, so what we're going to do, but if you notice, I'm leaving -5 on this side. You could add 5 to the other side, or you can leave it. But if you leave it on the side like we're doing here, there's one very important part. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to do this part where I divide this by 2, and I'm going to get -2. And then once you go -4 divided by 2, we got -2. Now I'm going to square it, and that's going to give me +4. So my +4, oops, that's an equal sign there. All right, so my +4 I put on this side with the parentheses. Now be careful, because if you notice, we're keeping it on the same side of the equal sign. So notice these are on the same side. So since they're on the same side, you have to do opposite signs. So this is +4, you need to make this -4 to keep it balanced. Because before we would put +4 on this side, but if you were to move it over, it would be a -4 anyways. All right, so just be careful with that way. And then once you've got all of this, you're going to write this as your parentheses squared. So remember, this is just your b, which is -2, and then these two are going to be the part that's outside the parentheses. All right, and I'll show you a different way to do that a little bit later. So we get to our vertex here, which is 2, -9. Again, you're going to have to extend your graph, sorry. And then we're going to plot our other points. So we have our x-intercepts, and we have our y-intercept. And then once you've got all these important points or main points of your parabola, go ahead and graph it. All right, so now for this one, I want you to try this on your own, but I'm giving you which forms to put where, and then make sure, of course, you graph the major points. All right, so now what we're going to do is writing the equations of a parabola in standard form, and in this case, we're given the zeros and a point, and we want to write it in standard form. So really, they're just giving you a bunch of information. You need to plug it in. So we do have our zeros, which are your x-intercepts. So we can actually take these two and set it up here. So remember, if x equals, if x equals -2, then that's going to be x plus 2 equals 0. And that's where we got this guy from, okay? And then same thing from here. We just equaled it to 0, and we got x minus 5. All right, we don't know what a is, so that we do need to find. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, and we're going to plug in a point. So this is your x, this is your y, and if you notice, I plugged it in for your x's. And then now, go ahead, combine like terms, multiply them, and you get -6a equals -18. Divide both sides by -6. And you're going to get +3 equals a. Now that we know what a is, now we can go ahead and we can put a here, which we said is 3. And we have our parts from before. And then just go ahead, distribute. And you're going to get all of this, combine like terms, and then you're going to distribute this 3, which was outside your a value, to everything inside the parentheses, and then you'll get y equals 3x squared minus 9x minus 30 as standard form. All right, so this one is the same thing. It's giving you the x-intercepts, and it's giving you our -1 and 8. So remember, x equals -1 and x equals 8. So that means when you write it in, you're going to add 1 to both sides, and so that's where we got the x plus 1. Same here, we're going to subtract 8 to move it over here, and you get x minus 8. So our intercepts are these. Our y-intercept is this, so we can write that as an ordered pair, where that's your x and this is your y, and meaning we can substitute this here, and we can substitute this here where your y is. Now that we know all of our values, combine like terms, and then we've got -8a, divide both sides by -8, and you get -2 equals a. Now that we know what a is, we're going to plug that in here, and we're going to plug in the first part that we had here, and then just distribute. Combine like terms, you'll get x squared minus 7x minus 8, then distribute the -2, and then this is your final answer in standard form. Alright, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and I want you to give an equation in standard form using these points. You could use your y-intercept also, so that would help you. So you can do any of these points to help you. You do not have to use all the points, but you can use some of the points to help you. All right, and then writing the equation of a parabola in vertex form. So this is again kind of just plugging in what you know, solving for what you don't. So we know the vertex is 2, -1, so I'm going to set that up in vertex form. And then what we're going to do is the same thing. We don't know what a is, so we have to plug in a point on the parabola, in this case, which is 3, -4. So I plugged that in for your y and your x. And then we're going to go ahead and just combine like terms. And then solve it, and then I'll get a, so we get a1, a times 1 minus 1. So we get a minus 1, and then we're going to add 1 to both sides, and we'll get a is -3. Now we know this is -3, plug it in to your vertex form here, and that's your final equation. So what I want you to do is I want you to try this, and this is going to be very similar to what we did up here. And then on this one, you're going to do the same thing in vertex form, but I would use this point of 3, 1, and I would use this point of 0, 7. So you're going to go ahead and complete those. And that is going, all different forms of quadratic. So you have standard, vertex, and factored form.